Hello, my name is Liz Hiller with NACE. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Early Careers Talent Strategy, How Organizations Are Fairly and Efficiently Finding the Right Talent. We encourage you to actively participate in the chat and please post questions in the Q&A. It is my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Diley, Campus Talent Acquisition Leader for General Mills, and Kristen Cooper from SHL. Take it away, ladies.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you all for tuning in today. Very excited to speak with Elizabeth and talk all things early careers with you. I'm sure that you all have heard of General Mills, so before I introduce Elizabeth, going to take just a moment and share more on SHL. My name is Kristen Cooper, and I partner with clients across the world to really make their talent practices more inclusive and fair. SHL helps businesses leverage the power of people, science, and technology. We have tools ranging from psychometric assessment to interviewing technology to interactive talent dashboards. And really the core of what we do is simple. We reduce unconscious bias, and we do this by using assessment data to bring objective, efficient, and effective data into talent decisions. And today we're going to highlight General Mills' strategy, really focusing at the top part of this employee lifecycle diagram. So as you think about your pipeline of early careers talent, your future leaders, how are we helping inform those hiring decisions? How can we provide really meaningful information to be used for onboarding and to facilitate the interaction with your new manager or cohort leader? We'll talk about how assessment data can drive development and even in the future, help with talent mobility and looking at your high potentials, succession planning. And excited to share more on how General Mills is doing some of these things. Before we jump into the core of the conversation, wanted to level set on SHL's approach to skills. I know skills are a very hot topic right now. A lot of our clients are really moving to becoming more of a skills-based organization. And we really look at skills as the great equalizer. As companies are potentially removing degree requirements and looking at past experience or potential to do the job, skills can very much inform somebody's ability to succeed in a role. And not all skills are equal. They are very different. And to walk you through what you see on the screen, we like the analogy of a tree. And as you think about the season that we're going into, and as the trees are shedding their leaves and going into this new season next year, we look at those skills really at the top as those evolving skills. So these are skills that might go out of date year to year, season to season. And I think it's very important that when you think about selection, that we're not necessarily screening out on these evolving skills unless they're 100% necessary on day one on a job. And we'll talk more about that. And then the semi-durable is more stable, but really where SHL has invested a lot of time and science and technology into is the root of what makes someone who they are. And it's those durable skills, and it's the ability to think critically and collaborate, communicate. A lot of what NACE is measuring through the 8 career ready work competencies. And again, we'll talk about how SHL directly measures these things, which transitions us into the skills taxonomy. So again, as our clients are thinking of skills and how to measure them, how to develop for them, they really need a partner to bring precise measurement to the skills conversation. And we do that through our universal skills taxonomy. So just to walk you through what you see on the screen, if you think about the broad factors, I'll give you an example of leading and deciding. In this case, if you'll focus on the blue dot, those then roll down to different competencies, such as decision-making or leadership. And then we can even break that down further into specific skills. And I'll transition to the next slide to show an example of that. If you look at leading and deciding, do you make quick decisions? Do you make difficult decisions? Are you making considered decisions? So we're really able to be precise and measure these skills independently. And again, we'll talk about how General Mills is doing this in their talent programs. And I know a lot of you were very interested in the NACE competencies and how it ties to this master framework. Just for anyone who may not be familiar with the 8 career readiness competencies, wanted to show them on the screen here. But using that leadership as an example, hopefully on the previous slide, that just gave an example of how we can very much narrow in on leadership. And just to take that a step further on the next slide, I've highlighted specifically some of the NACE competencies measured through this framework. So when you think about inclusion as an example, how are we able to really put the team first and encourage diversity, accept others, and again, be very specific in how we're looking at these behaviors in a selection program. And a lot of organizations are taking this even a step further from NACE competencies and tailoring to their own values and to their leadership frameworks, which leads me to Elizabeth, who is going to really bring this to life and share more on their programs and how they're really embracing that skills first approach at General Mills. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, SHL and NACE, for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Diley. I lead campus recruiting at General Mills. I've been with the company for 15 years, and most of the time I have been in early careers, talent acquisition. I'm so passionate about this space. It is, I get out of bed every morning thinking about, okay, how am I going to make this space better? What am I going to do to move this forward? And every year is different, and we have an opportunity not only in higher ed but in employer space as well to make change and to provide opportunities for students, continuing their education.
Yes, absolutely. And I was so excited to see the attendees for today's session and really the representation across higher education as well as employers. And what a beautiful opportunity to talk about how we can equip students to enter the workforce. And Elizabeth, I would love for you to share a little bit more about your program. And I mean, obviously, General Mills is a top 100 intern program for 3 years running. You are a Forbes #1 place for new college grads to start their employment. What is the secret behind what you're doing? Tell us more.
It is, I feel so fortunate to be sitting in the chair I am with the wonderful brands you see behind me as well. And I know it's lunchtime for some of us, so I'm sure I'm making some of you all hungry. But General Mills is a house of brands, and we have some of the most iconic brands that you see in your pantry in the grocery aisle every day. And we're really feeding America and the world. And I feel very fortunate to work for a company that really puts a lot of emphasis on early career programming, not only at the internship level, but in the entry level space as well. And so, one of the things that we have internships across all different functions, across all different businesses, as well as rotational program and early career spots for full-time hires. And that includes all majors as well. And so a little bit more about the program is we really want to make sure that we're finding early talent in all the different areas of the business. And so we hired about 200 interns every summer, and then about 200 full-time folks as well. So my team takes care of about 400 hires across the US and Canada. And obviously we have other markets as well that are doing that in other areas of the world. But specifically, my role is really centered around our headquarters, our Canada office, and then our manufacturing facilities. And so one thing that's a little bit different about General Mills is obviously we have a big headquarters based here in Minneapolis where I'm calling in from, but we also have over 20 different locations for our manufacturing facilities, our sales offices. And so we're also coordinating all of those internships across those different areas as well. As I think about the Forbes Award that was awarded to us over the summer, that was just huge for us because it just showcased all the great work that goes into the early career programming, all the work that TA does on the campus side and also the experience side as well, bringing in new hires and creating opportunities for growth. We're looking for people to grow their careers at General Mills, not just for a couple of years. We really want to make sure to provide opportunity for development, provide opportunity for mentorship, and provide opportunity for people to spend years and years, if they'd like, at General Mills and have a fulfilling career in the food industry.
Yes, absolutely. And I think of General Mills and such a strong brand and recognition out there. And I'm curious, at the very top of your process, and when you're first interacting with prospective candidates and students on campus, are you looking at function or department specific roles, or are you posting broad job descriptions? Tell us a little bit about how you're structuring the very upfront.
Yeah. You know, first and foremost, I think it's important that students have interest in food and in the CPG industry as well. And that's one thing, we see students have broad interest across industries, which is great as you're starting to learn. But we have a question that we ask, like, what is your favorite brand? Why CPG industry? Just to ensure that people are understanding what, the CPG industry is about, the consumer product good industry. But are pretty specific when it goes out to function by function, but we're also very well connected. And so one of the things that I do like to do is bring more than one function to a school or to an event, to understand, because a marketing student may fit in our sales area, they may fit in a different area of the company. And so really looking at skills, and, our, and major, but really thinking about skills and competencies and where they could fit within the organization. One of the things that I think is important for campus recruiters is, we're filling jobs, but we're also educating students and helping them figure out what they want to do when they grow up. And I know some of us are still figuring out what we want to do when we grow up, but a lot of those conversations are around, like, what is it that drives you? What is it that's important to you? What are you hoping to get in early career? And my recruiter is helping to force the conversation of what it is, and to really dig deep in the soul of, like, what is it that you want to do? A good example is, I had no idea I wanted to be in recruiting. I didn't even know this was a job back in the day. I went to a small liberal arts school in Minnesota, and I was first generation college educated. And so navigating the world of business was really complicated, and really something that I was not equipped to do. And I had a business major, and I really, really liked my psych and sociology classes. I ended up minoring in those, just by accident, because I kept taking them. And it wasn't until that I kind of fell in the job in recruiting at General Mills that I was like, oh my gosh, everything that I did in my classes of social dynamic, or social, like how people work together, group dynamics, all of those classes that I kind of, took on the side, started to make sense of why I was doing that with my business major as well. Of, hey, I actually want to be working with people, and I want to be working in an HR role. And, all throughout my life, people are like, Elizabeth, you should really think about sales. And I didn't really understand what sales was. And it took my job at General Mills just finding a coordinator position. I actually, I spent the bulk of my career, I've been here at General Mills, and I actually started as a recruiting coordinator, and then now leading the team for campus recruiting. And if you would have asked me back then if I was going to be in this job when I first started at General Mills 15 years ago, I would have said, there's no way. And here I am, loving every moment of it and really excited to continue driving the mission of General Mills. And you see on the screen a little bit about General Mills. Our vision is really to be the undisputed leader in food. And our purpose, and you heard me talk a little bit about this up front, is making food the world loves and feeding the world, not only humans, but pets too. We have a big pet food business in Blue Buffalo. But all of that is grounded on that last bullet point that you see in our values. And this is what ties back to some of the work that SHL does with General Mills, and also with NACE, as well, as we think about the competencies. And, all of these things drive together to really think about the foundation of the people that we are hiring, and that they are connecting in with our values. And so our interview guides, our assessments are all tied back to that foundation work that you see on winning together and doing the right thing all the time, championing belonging, and continuously innovating. And so you see those in all of the things that we talk about on campus, through interview questions, through just general conversation, and then you'll see that weave through in our assessments as well. And Kristen, I know you shared those couple slides in the upfront, and really these 4 values really fit into many of the buckets that not only NACE is sharing, but SHL can drive assessment work as well on.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for sharing about your story as well. And I'm sure so many of us and the students that we know are experiencing the same thing of perhaps our major is not where we end up. And I love what you said about really being attracted to the CPG industry and knowing that your candidates want to come and work at General Mills, and how do they come into the organization and then grow a fruitful career from there, and really looking at that holistic approach. Tell us a little bit more about the actual programs and what is the structure? Are you exposing interns to different parts of the business to help them understand where might they be a great fit?
Yeah, great question. And so I'll talk a little bit about our internship program, because I think that's easier to talk about, and why we structure it the way we do and the strategy behind it. And so our internship program is really built to fill our full-time roles. And so we get really great work out of summer interns that are paid, and that's probably a question I'm guessing Kristen's going to ask me in a bit here. But we do make sure to we're really using it as assessment tool, the 10 weeks, to get great work, to get them exposure to Minneapolis or the manufacturing facility or the business center that they're going to be in. And then also assessing them on their performance to make job offers at the end of the summer. And workforce planning is a big part of that. And I'm sure, and feel free, everyone, put questions in the chat. This is meant to be interactive too. So if you have any questions or want me to elaborate on anything more in depth, I'm happy to do that. But workforce planning is a big thing that we do to tie into our internship program, because again, that is such a huge feeder pool of us for full-time hires. We spend a lot of time making sure that internship program is going to be fruitful for the business and fruitful for the student, to have key takeaways and be able to build that resume. Throughout the summer, my team manages the whole summer. So to go in a little bit of strategy and also how my team is set up, we really manage all aspects of the internship program from a logistical standpoint. And so we really want every intern to feel very, very, if you're in sales or if you're in finance or if you're in IT, that it all feels very similar of an experience, and that they're getting access to the same people. Kristen, I think your question was do we expose people to the other areas of the business? And I think that is something that's really important, especially as we think about these students making decisions to come to General Mills, because there is times in your career that you may be switching function, or maybe you had your internship and it wasn't exactly what you're hoping, and you're going to pivot to a different area during your senior year. And so we do that through speaker series. We do that through individual functions. We do job fairs to showcase different areas within a function. We also do a lot of cross intern coffees and connects, just so people can learn what other people are doing in the business. Our work at General Mills is so cross-functional, just like I'm sure every company that's on the call today. You get exposure to so many different places just sitting in a meeting room. We're not just siloed into our own functions. So we want to create that as well in the internship program as we think about the 10 weeks that they're spending with us at General Mills.
Yes, absolutely. And you touched on workforce planning, and I know how challenging workforce planning can be. I was at CFX for 10 years and definitely empathize with it's not always easy to predict the hiring needs in the future. My understanding is that you do make offers at the end of an internship program. How are you able to do that through your workforce planning?
Yeah. So we hire enough interns to fill every full-time spot if we can. Like I said, it is a very big driver of our full-time programming is the internship. And so every year we are looking out 3 years to see what is going to be our hiring need. And obviously that changes, and we make corrections or we make additions or we reduce in areas. We're looking at that constantly, but We have a really nice process put together at General Mills of getting all of our businesses and HR partners together, DE&I, and get them together in a room and really think about, okay, how many interns are we going to need to get to our full-time number for the next upcoming year? And my goal and something that we communicate is that if you perform over the summer, you will receive an offer to return with us. And we actually use that during offer conversations with people too, of being like, hey, ask your employer, that you are courting to see if you want to go to that for an internship, what it looks like at the end of the summer. And since we do so much work on the upfront and look at data and analytics, look at the talent flow, look if we're going to be doing any M&A, look if we're looking at building a different department or a different resource. Since we're doing so much work on the front end, we can confidently go in and really think through, okay, what is our internship number and where are we going to be making those full-time offers? And we actually make full-time offers before the intern leaves the building at General Mills. And so they leave their internship knowing if it was successful or not. And we have really, really great conversion coming back into our full-time hiring program. Right now we're sitting at 86% with still some offers outstanding. So I'm guessing we're going to be landing around that number for this upcoming year. And so we typically see General Mills return on an internship at about 75 to 95% acceptance rate.
Wow, that kudos to you and your teams. That is remarkable. And I'm sure extending those offers, what a great way to close out the summer and really have your new hires very excited. That's awesome. And thank you all for your engagement and participation. We do have several questions, so I want to take a moment. They're related to this topic. Derek asked, do you focus on a certain percentage of co-op that are sophomore, juniors, seniors based on your workforce planning needs? And do you do double terms or only summer internships?
Great question. It's a really good question to start thinking about of where you want to engage and at what level you want to engage. We actually really target juniors for the undergrad program. We really target juniors to do the internship program to hopefully flow into that full-time talent pipeline. There are occasions that we do take sophomores, but we have seen that there's a lot of sophomores that don't do the double. We do offer a return internship after their sophomore year if they are successful. But we see a lot of folks deciding to go and try a different industry or a different area, which I think is perfectly fine and great for self-exploration and understanding like what it is that you want to be doing. And so our stats aren't that great for, I think right now I saw that about 50% of I think we only had 12 sophomore interns this past summer. Only 50% of those are going to return. And a lot of them are in the food science or in the manufacturing facility that they're very much targeting food. Or their degrees revolve around food science or chemies that are working the line. And so it's harder in our business areas, especially in finance and sales, to get those sophomores to return for a second internship. But what I will say is we do keep them close if they do turn us down for that second internship to come into our full-time pipeline. And so that is something that, when we see talent, we keep it really close to us as well. Like we keep them engaged in newsletters, we keep them engaged in product offerings. We send them a box of Honey Nut Cheerios or a coupon for Totino's pizza rolls just to continue to make sure that they're engaging with our brands. We have this interesting thing for being a CPG company. I really want to build consumers too for a lifetime as well. I'm hiring great talent, right? That's my number one priority. But one of the things is exposure to our brands and exposure to General Mills, and hoping that they continue to be a consumer with us down the road too. So I can talk about candidate experience again for probably another whole 3 hours of a webinar, and that I love that. That's another sweet spot of mine, is talking about engagement and talent branding. But to your question, we actually don't do any co-ops. The question on co-ops, we don't do any co-ops during the school year. We really concentrate on those summer internships. And over the years, we've actually gotten tighter and tighter. And this is just some advice for some companies out there, is thinking through start dates and thinking about resourcing of your team of, hey, do we want to have multiple start dates? How do we want to do it? We have found less start dates and bringing interns more in bulk is very helpful when you start thinking about housing, orientation, your own team's resourcing of getting them up to speed. And then, thinking about that life cycle over the internship of calibrating that talent as
Yes.
well.
Absolutely. And I think there's many reasons that having cohorts and having that shared start date can be helpful to build the camaraderie and really learn from each other. Wanted to just give the example of when you think about an entire cohort of interns or a new grad cohort, how can you really look at group level insights and differences? And using this example of a dashboard, you can actually see maybe we need to have a targeted conversation or training around coping with setbacks and criticism, and not only understanding yourself, but also each other. And this is just an example of that group level data. So love that. We also have a couple of questions here on skills and ties into the skills that we were just looking at. But if you could speak to how you select your early talent. Are you selecting based on skills? And this is from Chris in the chat. How do you screen candidates based on skills?
Yeah, this is a change I think that we've seen in the industry is moving more towards skills based versus leadership and what they've done in the past at clubs and teamwork, things like that. This has been a change I think for the whole industry, and not only in campus recruiting but in for our experienced professionals that are doing recruiting as well. I think the biggest thing is thinking through not just like tell me a time when, but like more like explain the way that you got there, or like what tools and resources did you use, versus some of the more softer side of more asking for more questions around the process of how somebody made it or what they're using to get to those. We're also adding in more mini case studies or mini scenarios in that instance too, of like understanding what tools that they can use and what they have used in the past. And so this is an ever evolving thing that I think we're really thinking through. It's also been a change with leadership as well, of thinking through more experiences as well and jobs that maybe aren't the marketing club president, or may not be, somebody may have 3 jobs that they're working at and building interview responses from being a stock person at a Walmart store, and understanding that people have different experiences across the board, especially as we think about students that may be at a commuter college. They may have different leadership opportunities or different leadership experiences than what somebody that's living on a campus and able to go to things in the evening. And that's, I think, been a learning for my team as we've evolved and understand colleges and universities more, but also understanding or making sure to communicate those up to your leadership too, that students look different today than they have in the past. Some students are just doing virtual online colleges. Some people, again, are at a commuter college that may not have those experiences. And so drawing more from real life is becoming more and more important to General Mills, not just looking at a GPA number, not just looking at a resume for a certain club or activity, but understanding that those things can come from being a barista at Starbucks or being a server at your local diner. And so I think that's something that's been continuing to evolve and something I'm super passionate as I think about the NACE competencies, as I think about General Mills values of how to think through getting those experiences from real world versus just tell me a time when questions.
Absolutely. Well, and using potentially that assessment data to inform the interviews and just an example process here of, you could be meeting people at career fairs and sending them this assessment. Can you speak about how you are using the SHL assessment in your current workflow?
Yeah, so I also I saw there was a question in the chat just about screening resumes too. So
Yes.
I'm trying to weave that in as well. I mean, I'm fortunate to work at a company that has a big brand, and that we actually have quite a few applications to all of our roles, and really the pain sometimes is getting through all of them. And so we really need to do a good job screening up front on the resumes. And we're looking for It's really hard unless you're having a conversation with somebody just to look at a resume. And so at the booth, we're really asking why General Mills, why this role, and to understand again if they're interested in CPG, how much research they've already done. And one of the questions I like to ask is also, tell me something that's not on your resume. Like, what are you really proud of? And that really opens up somebody to tell me about, something that maybe they didn't feel comfortable putting on their resume, or they didn't, or that they're really excited to share with me. They may have just got promoted at their job. They may be working, as a big brother, big sister, and, there was a milestone there that they're very excited about. It starts bringing life to the person. And like, it's a question that makes people smile too. And I will say this, a lot of companies approach interviewing as very scary and like, we want to know everything about you. I actually see interviewing as a dialogue, and especially when we could again talk about mental health and things like that and neurodiversity. Getting someone to smile at the beginning of their interview and to tell me something they're super proud of just sets a tone. And honestly, that's the tone I want somebody to go away with of General Mills as well. Like, I want them to walk through the grocery store and think about, maybe they didn't get the offer, but they had a really good conversation with us and they got to share something that they're really passionate about with me. And so again, I think we need to think about these interview practices, especially with Gen Z. Like, we're interviewing them, but they're interviewing us as well. So how we go about that is a whole different thing. So I went off subject a little bit, but sorry. So we do use SHL in the interview process for us. And so we actually use it in the decision-making process. So we'll do a first round interview with somebody, and that's when the assessment comes into play. For internships, we're using a cognitive assessment that SHL provides. It's very quick, it's very easy. Students can do it from wherever that they can on a mobile device. And it is a data point in the final decision. And so we look at assessment information differently, where it's just a part of the conversation and we weave it into some of the things that we may be hearing from the interviewers. It's not a knockout at the beginning, it's just a part of the conversation. And then we're also exploring how we're using that as an employee comes on board. So that's still a little bit TBD of like what we're going to do with some of this information and like how are we sharing that. And then from a full-time perspective, we're doing a personality assessment as well as a cognitive assessment as well, again using it during the decision-making process.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. And just to bring to life what you all are looking at on the top right, and back to your comment, Elizabeth, about the interviewing and having that dialogue. This is just an example of where maybe before the assessment, maybe after the interview, you can actually share more information to the students, to the candidates, and it could be videos from your leadership or from a hiring manager, and really taking them a step deeper in that process. But then to your point, leveraging that data later in the development, and again, understanding yourself even better as well as your peers. So thank you for really walking us through that. And a couple more questions here. Do you use the START interview method still? START.
Yeah, we use STAR, situation, task, action, result. And so that is the way we do interviewing training, and that we like to hear from the student. And so, and especially if you're from a college or a higher ed institution, I think that's still formatting questions and answers in a way that is concise and like not I mean, and what's been really interesting, the virtual environment, students have banks of answers and you can see somebody looking from side to side as you're maybe having a Zoom conversation with them. A little bit different than what it was when we were all in person, and a lot of the conversation was more natural versus some of the things that we're seeing on video. But I would say, yes, we are still using the STAR model to be more concise and to understand what the result was in the end. And, one of the things too that we're seeing is, students, we like to hear what they're doing in the process. A lot of the time we hear a lot of wheeze and wheeze and wheeze, but we really want to know the I's, like what are, I always say an interview isn't a time to be humble, right? Like it's a time to showcase, it's just like your resume, showcase yourself. That's the only time that you get. And obviously you want to showcase teamwork and collaboration and how you know, work together to get something done. But what were the contributions that you did yourself as well?
Absolutely. Great point. And I'm seeing a couple of questions in the Q&A as well as the chat on, is it a single assessment? I just want to anchor us on, for one requisition, it's always very important to have the same experience for selection. So have similar, you can go off script for interviewing as needed, make sure everything you're asking is job related. Same thing for an assessment, make sure that everything is tying back to the role and the skills needed. Just to answer the question in the Q&A about a single assessment versus multiple, this is an example of a Ready Now Early Careers assessment based on over 20,000 data points that SHL collected. So all of this data can be collected in 20 minutes. And what's in green are the skills that early careers talents tend to have as strengths. So in general, they're very strong at taking responsibility, coping, adapting. Where you see yellow are from this data where there tend to be more developmental opportunities. So again, you can get this data in your interview process and see specifically what types of questions you should ask about a candidate's ability to use time efficiently. This is an example of a guide that'll populate that you could actually use to drive that interview. So going back to, I know I went through the initial slides pretty quickly to jump into the root of the conversation here, but this is an example of a Ready Now assessment that can then be tailored to your organization's values, as General Mills has done. So hopefully that helped clarify around the assessment piece. People are asking, is there a link to the NACE data that you were talking about, the essential skills? I guess that's more for me. Yes, we do have the linking to NACE, exactly how the NACE competencies are measured by SHL assessments. And we will absolutely share that in the follow-up. And that is something we can directly measure. I can also show just one example to help, because I realize there are a lot of higher education individuals on the line. So let me show an example of directly measuring to the NACE competencies. So perhaps for students, you want to deliver one of these assessments. This is an example of how the data can populate directly tied back to NACE. So I can leave that on the screen actually for a second to answer that question. And you can see back to those skills that I was describing, exactly which skills are being measured. And again, this brings a lot of precision to the framework. And then it can directly benefit students with development tips, interviewing questions that they could think about if they're interviewing with a General Mills, for example, how to get ready. And then I know that having evaluators is often important in higher ed. So maybe you want a supervisor from an internship to provide feedback. We're able to incorporate that 360 element into that data that I was just looking at. And Elizabeth, I know that you have a robust assessment program once the interns are on board and throughout their journey at General Mills. Can you share a little bit more about the interventions across their experience, as well as how you're equipping managers? Because I feel like that direct relationship to your manager during an internship is so important.
Yeah, I think, you know, education is in getting folks ready to be an interviewer or a intern manager is very important. So we do unconscious bias training. We also do interview skills training for everybody that's going out to campus. And then also for our internship program, there is an intern manager training as well to get folks up to speed of, you know, what it means to be a manager of an intern, because it's a lot of, you know, a lot of the time these are the first time a student will ever have step foot in a corporate environment. And so it's a really different than if a manager was to take me on as a direct report. A student is a different experience. And so we teach a lot in that training of intern managers about Gen Z, what's new, what's happening. You know, it's you know, what they're thinking about, what trends and resources that they may need to help understand to the Gen Z student. And then also part of that is, making sure that the intern manager is putting a clear project together. And so that's a little bit different than some other internships that I've heard of. We are very specific about what the deliverables are over the summer. We're tying that back to a business need. It's a real business need within General Mills. We actually don't even tell interns what their project that they're going to be working on until about a month before they start with us, because we don't know what's going to be happening in May of this upcoming year. Like there could be a honey shortage and all of a sudden we need a sourcing intern to be working on how are we going to get honey for our Nature Valley granola bars. And so we actually don't commit to what brand you're going to be working on or what project you're going to be working on. You are told you're going to be working in a function and that you'll learn your manager and your projects about a month in advance. And that also, we are very clear that you get to put what you prefer to work on as well. Like if you're really interested in, if you're a digital and technology intern and you're really interested in AI or you're really interested in coding or whatever it may be, we also take that feedback and help match with the business need as well. But to go back to the intern manager training, we also talk a lot about assessment and calibration of interns. Again, I talked at the top of the hour that this is an extremely important pipeline into our full-time roles. And so not only is recruiting checking in with our interns, but also we are hosting midsummer evaluations and calibrations with all intern managers of a function. And so this is why start date is also to have a more singular or one start date is really important, because we are bringing intern managers together to calibrate the intern talent at midsummer. Very similar to if you all are managers of people and you calibrate your own direct reports at the end of the year as you're starting to think about performance reviews. We do that at midsummer with our interns, and then also provide written feedback to interns as well as a one-on-one midsummer evaluation to the intern. And at that time, they're learning if they're on track or if they have some things that they need to work on or things that we may need to see in the back half. Because sometimes it's not even that they need to work on it, but hey, we haven't seen your analytical skills and we're really excited about this project for you to showcase that. Or, we've seen some things that we're hoping that we can start course correcting to help you get to where we want to get you to at the end of the summer. And so that happens formally across our whole intern class of calibrating at midsummer. And then we're also doing that at the end of the summer as we're deciding offers. And I think there's a question in the chat of like, how do you know what function or where an intern is going to be? We actually, if you intern in a function, that is usually the offer that you're going to get to return into the early career program, or if there's a rotation program with that. If an intern at the end of the summer does come to me and say, hey, I was a finance intern this summer, but I'm really interested in sales, and I think my analytical skills would match like my desire to be in front of the customer and being out on the road and going to your major, our major customers are, Walmart, Target, Amazon. Like there are people that decide that that's more, they want to be more facing in that. And so we actually will do a quick fit test to see if they should receive an offer in sales versus finance as well. So there is room to do an internship in one area of General Mills, but then be like, but I might want my full-time offer somewhere else. And then deciding, what way that they want to go and if it's a fit for General Mills to make that move with somebody.
I love what you're describing, because I feel like so many students who I interact with, they really talk about this desire to start something of their own and maybe become entrepreneurs. And I think about the skills to potentially go cross-functionally and really expand your exposure to so many different parts of a company. So it sounds like you're very focused and targeted and you're having these projects. But you're also giving some flexibility if they need to explore other parts of the business. Are there other ways that you're embracing that entrepreneurial spirit of students?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think this is one thing that, I get asked a lot of the questions from students a lot, like what differentiates a good intern, or like where do you see interns succeed? And I think for our higher ed folks on the call, one of the things that I really see is students that take initiative and have the grit and like the hustle to a lot of the time that they're just getting like a business problem that could say, hey, you know, we are struggling with turn on our yellow box Cheerios, you know, you know, whatever it may be, like go out and find what's the reason for this. Like it could be super ambiguous of like, I don't know, like, I mean, you asked me that, I don't even know, but like for a student then to put together a plan to figure that out, and like do that with like the help of their manager and those around them, and like understand that you're not going to get a syllabus when you come into the major companies, and to any company really is, you're not going to say, this is what I need to do today to get to the offer. You're not going to get a check mark. I don't need to read 30 pages and write a book report on Of Mice and Men to like, then, you know, whatever it may be. So students, it's very different in corporate versus when you're, you know, getting your degree, and a lot of the things are more syllabus driven. A lot of this is more, hey, you have the opportunity to create. And so going back to the entrepreneur spirit, every day, you know, I wake up and I feel like I'm running my own business here. Like this is with the help of a major corporation and resourcing behind me, but like we approach our jobs every day as our own businesses, making business decisions. And I think that's one thing that I love about General Mills and a lot of the companies that are on the call today is we're really giving folks the opportunity to test and learn and to make big business decisions with the resourcing around them.
Absolutely. Yes, and taking ownership, and I completely agree of how can we foster that spirit for our students as well as for our employees. I heard a podcast recently of another CPG company, and it gave the example of even for their call center representatives, rather than just looking at it as just answering calls every day, they actually looked at what were the most common problems that people were calling in with, and the bottle cap was difficult to turn. So they were able to bring that feedback to the out the field, and they were able to redesign that bottle cap, make it easier, therefore less calls. And that's a direct impact of those CSRs who brought this data to life. So regardless of the role in an organization, I agree with you, take ownership and empower our people. I completely agree.
Yeah, and just to add on that too, you know, again, you know, I'm seeing some really nice things in the chat. Like a lot of students are used to getting their marching orders and then going home, reading or, you know, doing the assignment, coming back and presenting on it. But doing the work not in the classroom setting, or, you know, doing the work in the library with their teammates. Working in an organization is very different. I am updating with my boss on a regular basis. I am showcasing my work. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's scratch on a piece of paper. Sometimes it's like, I'm at a crossroads here. Can you just help me think through these two things? Like when we work in corporations, it is out loud. We're not taking something, running to a closed office, working on it, and then like presenting something beautiful like that doesn't happen, right? We are collaborating. Like I even think about this webinar, Kristen and I met a few times to talk about how we wanted to do this and like bounce ideas off of one another. I brought some ideas, she texted me some things, and then we all came together and we're like, hey, this is what this is going to look like, this is what we're going to do here. And that is where I see interns really thrive at General Mills, that are doing that are showcasing that messy work, that are showing what it comes, and that there are some interns that aren't successful because they take their project, they run away, then they come and they present this beautiful solution to something or recommendation, and it's completely off base because they didn't realize we did that a year ago, and they didn't check with the person sitting next to them that's been with General Mills for 10 years. Like they're not using their resourcing around them, or when they were at that crossroads, they didn't start asking tough probing questions. Or they were at the crossroads and they stayed at the crossroads because they didn't know how to just make a decision and move forward with it either.
Oh, absolutely. And you're touching on, I think, some really important skills and traits, especially for our higher education attendees here who are interacting with students every day, coaching them, counseling. So hopefully there's some strong note-taking happening, and that is informative. You also touched on neurodiversity when you were talking about equipping your managers to be a good leader and to lead their interns. So as you were describing some of these traits, I was thinking about the strong prevalence of mental health conditions, and especially for early career talent and people whose life was shaken by COVID and maybe they had to go virtual, maybe they took a pause. When you think about mental health, but as well as some of the other neurodivergent conditions, and when I say neurodiversity, I mean really the natural variations in the way people think and process information. I wanted to just speak about this for a second because I've been at career fairs where I believe for neurodivergent individuals, it was difficult to have a very strong interview or even have the confidence to go up and have that handshake. So again, back to assessment data and really reducing unconscious bias through objective data, especially for our neurodivergent community. I think it's extremely important. I added a QR code here, especially for our higher education partners. If you want to scan that, SHL is partnering with institutions as well as organizations on neurodiversity, and really incorporating this data into how we design our assessments. And this is a large program that we launched back in 2019. So please check that out. But I'm just curious, again, you touched on neurodiversity, Elizabeth, but when you think about the various types of students that you're bringing in and interns, and again, that training for managers, is there anything that you would add on the topic of neurodiversity?
Yeah, I think it's something that we should continue pushing in all of our seats that we're in today. The workforce looks different and people are more open about this as well. And I think people should be open on this subject. I think there was a time, and again, I've been at General Mills for 15 years, and it's been fun to see and actually I'm very proud to see the evolution of this, and where it's more common for somebody to tell you about these things too versus hiding them. And I feel that very similar with Gen Z, and I think that's going to continue to shape the work environment that we're all working in right now, is that these are things that we should be all talking about, and they're not a constant either. And that's been something that I've been really, really thinking through, is that even like a coworker that you may have worked with before the pandemic, maybe actually a different coworker today than what they were, and things and take out the pandemic, take just anything that may have happened over yesterday or years, or that we are ever changing individuals, and we should always approach each other as ever changing individuals. And people that are different bring more. I just say, like, business can only be done when people bring different perspective and think about things in different ways and approach work in different ways as well.
Yes.
And there's not one person that you should hire, and just not one student that's going to fit your profile. And we should do everything possible to make people comfortable and to be able to showcase themselves at work. Not only is it inclusive and a part of the belonging culture that General Mills has, but also, again, it's good business. It's
Yeah.
really good business.
Absolutely. I agree completely. And my mind was also going to AI and automation. And as you're speaking, again, some of the ways that we have to embrace humanity, but also leverage technology in today's world, which brings me to one of the Q&A questions.
Yeah.
How do you think the emphasis on AI, machine learning, automation, and other technical innovations are affecting the efficiency and effectiveness of your talent strategy?
Yeah, there's so much to be said here, and still so much to be figured out, right? Like, I mean, every day something has changed. I think one of the things I like to caution people too, is this is such a new space, and like security is such a thing, and like how these machines are using the data that we're inputting. That's all some things that we all need to be thinking about through that. But it will definitely shape and change the way that recruiters look through applications. And it always has, like, technology has been doing that. Applicant tracking systems have the possibility to do that. There's vendors that do it for you. There's machines that will go through LinkedIn and give you candidates. I mean, there are many, many vendors already touching this space. I think just like a New York City cab driver, we're going to need to adapt when Uber comes in. Like, it's just going to change the way that we do our job, not necessarily for the worse. I think that there are going to be a lot of time savings where we can develop different skill sets to prompt these machines and prompt these things. And like, so as we talk about skills-based learning, that's something we haven't even touched, that we're going to need people that know how to run these things, and that they're not me for sure. But we're going to need higher ed to be like, okay, what skills can we start building into the curriculum to help people like General Mills or larger corporations figure this out, or to be the prompts, or to understand security behind it. So again, I kind of went in a few different directions on that, but it's definitely going to change, but I don't think it's for the worse. So
Absolutely. Well, and great point. As you think about the jobs that are changing, and there could be majors, there will be majors that certainly don't exist today. In our final moments, do you have advice for our higher education attendees? When you think about our leaders of career services and interacting with our future leaders, any advice or parting thoughts for higher ed? And then we'll transition to organizations.
Yeah, I think, I love my higher ed partners, and, I love the space of academia. It is, I get out to campus quite often during this time of year, and have been on a college campus about once a week, and just love it. And I just want to say thank you for educating and getting the students ready for tomorrow, and for corporations like General Mills, and for many on the call. I think it's going to continue to be, keeping close to your employer partners, using them as resources. I mean, I have a team of wonderful recruiters that are ready to be able to come out and teach classes, or to prep students. And I can't stress enough how important it is to teach students how to continue to network, and to be ready for conversations with employers.
Yes, absolutely. And I forgot to mention in my introduction, but I live in Auburn, Alabama, so home of Auburn University, and same as you, on campus regularly interacting with students. And thank you to all of our friends in academia. Really appreciate all of the work that you do. Parting thoughts for heads of campus recruiting and internships and our employer partners. Any advice, Elizabeth?
Yes, I would. I'd be remiss not to say keep paying those interns. That I think is a big thing. But as I reflect on the last few years, I mean, it has been not only for our school partners, but for our corporate partners too. The space has changed so much every year. I went in this year in August thinking I knew exactly how this year was going to end. I've had to shift and change just as many times as I had in the pandemic. And so I see you, I feel you, I hear you. And so if you're feeling that way, that like you thought you were going into one recruiting season and it's been a very different one. And I know we're kind of coming close to the end here in November for the fall recruiting season, but I think one of the things that I really want to leave our corporate partners is making sure you're educating your leadership, the folks that are running our companies, and continuing to educate them about Gen Z, continuing to think about your benefits and how they are going to support Gen Z, how they're going to support mental health, how we're thinking about work differently, and continue to drive change, because Gen Z is going to change the way we're all working today. They already are, but they're going to continue to do that. And so we need to be ready to support them, and also make changes within our organization and the way we recruit and the way we compensate them, because they're going to be our leaders as well at some point here too.
Oh, absolutely. Well said. And just a couple of resources for all of our attendees today. If you want to take a second and scan the barcode, you are not alone in these strategies and the exploration. SHL has several white papers and data for you across those 20,000 students that I mentioned. So please take a second, check out that research, and happy to support you and provide information as needed. Oh, and appreciate the commentary about the webinar. Hopefully it was informative. I feel like there's so much that we did not have time to touch on. So Elizabeth, we will certainly keep the conversation going. I'd love to have you on a podcast. We're also collaborating on NACE proposals for next summer. So anyone who would like to collaborate, please connect with us on LinkedIn. And we are excited to see you all in Arizona.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.